Patricia had been cooking for her family for 45 years. 45 years of early mornings, flour-dusted aprons, and the satisfying weight of a wooden spoon in her weathered hands. She'd learned to cook from her own mother, back when meals were ceremonies and kitchens were the heart of every home. Through 3 pregnancies, countless school events, holiday gatherings, and ordinary Tuesday nights, she had never missed a day. Not when the twins had chicken pox, not when her husband worked double shifts at the factory, not even when her arthritis flared so badly she could barely grip the knife to chop onions. The kitchen had been her domain, her gift to the people she loved most. Every recipe told a story. The beef stew that had comforted Sarah through her first heartbreak, the chocolate chip cookies that had celebrated every good report card, the Sunday roasts that had brought everyone together around a table that seemed to grow smaller as the children grew bigger. When Robert died 5 years ago, Patricia thought her cooking days might be numbered. The house felt too big, too quiet. The dining room table an expanse of polished wood that mocked her solitude. Sarah had been the one to suggest it, really. "Mom, why don't you come live with us? The kids would love having Grandma around, and honestly, I could use the help." It had seemed like a blessing then, a chance to be useful again, to fill her days with purpose instead of letting them drift by in that big empty house that echoed with 40 years of memories. She'd sold the family home, the one where she'd raised her 3 children, where Robert had built that crooked back deck with his own hands, where every room held pieces of a life fully lived. The money went into her savings account, untouched. She didn't need much anymore. Sarah's house was modern, all clean lines and open concepts that Patricia had never quite gotten used to. But the kitchen was spacious with a large island and enough counter space for all her projects. She'd found her rhythm quickly. Up at 5:30 every morning to start coffee, pack lunches for Sarah and her husband Mark, get 10-year-old Emma ready for school while baby Oliver still slept in his crib. The arrangement had worked beautifully, or so Patricia had thought. She did the grocery shopping, the meal planning, the endless cycle of cooking and cleaning that kept a household running. Sarah could focus on her marketing job, Mark on his contracting business. The children always had someone there when they got off the bus, homework help, and a grandmother's patient ear for their daily dramas. Patricia had never asked for payment, never expected it. This was family, after all. This was what mothers did. They gave and gave and gave until giving became as natural as breathing. When Sarah mentioned that daycare was so expensive, Patricia simply smiled and said she'd be happy to watch Oliver. When Mark complained about takeout costs, Patricia quietly took over all the cooking. When the house cleaner's rates went up, Patricia just started doing that too. She told herself she was needed. She told herself she was helping. She told herself that the exhaustion that settled into her bones each night was worth it because her family was thriving. Sarah's career was taking off. Mark's business was growing. The children were happy and healthy and never wanted for anything. But sometimes, in the quiet moments between tasks, Patricia caught herself wondering when she had stopped being Patricia and become simply Mom or Grandma, titles that seemed to define her entire existence. When had she last read a book that wasn't a children's story? When had she last made a decision about her own day without first considering everyone else's needs? She pushed those thoughts away. This was temporary, she reminded herself. Sarah and Mark were still young, still building their lives. They needed her now, but someday they wouldn't. And then, well, she'd figure that out when the time came. The Sunday dinners had been her idea. Every week she'd planned something special, a roast with Yorkshire pudding, or her famous lasagna, or the beef brisket that took all day to cook properly. These meals were her love letters to her family, her way of creating the kind of traditions she'd grown up with. She'd set the dining room table with Sarah's good china, light candles, make sure everyone's favorite sides were represented. For 5 years, these dinners had been sacred. Even when Mark's work ran late, even when Emma had soccer practice, even when baby Oliver was fussy, they made time for Sunday dinner. It was the one constant in their busy lives, the one thing Patricia could count on, which is why this particular Sunday felt different from the moment she woke up. Patricia stood in Sarah's gleaming kitchen, rolling the beef roast with practiced hands. The meat was perfect. Expensive, yes, but she'd been saving her Social Security money for months to afford something special. Today marked exactly 5 years since she'd moved in with them. 5 years of shared meals, shared space, shared lives. She'd thought it deserved celebrating, even if she was the only one who remembered the anniversary. The roast was stuffed with herbs from the little garden she'd planted in Sarah's backyard. Rosemary, thyme, a touch of sage. She'd been up since dawn preparing the sides. Roasted vegetables with honey and balsamic, her mother's famous green bean casserole, fresh dinner rolls that filled the house with the scent of yeast and butter. Everything was timed perfectly, orchestrated like a symphony she'd been conducting for decades. Emma wandered into the kitchen around noon, still in her pajamas, despite Patricia's gentle suggestions about getting dressed. At 10, she was all long limbs and attitude, balanced precariously between childhood and adolescence. "Smells good, Grandma," Emma said, stealing a piece of carrot from the cutting board. "What's the special occasion?" Patricia smiled, wiping her hands on her apron. "No special occasion, sweetheart. Just wanted to make something nice for Sunday dinner." "Cool. Hey, can I have some money for the mall later? Madison's mom is taking us to see that new movie." "Ask your mother, dear, and get dressed, please. Your Uncle David and Aunt Lisa will be here soon." Emma shrugged and padded away, leaving Patricia alone with her preparations. She didn't mention that she'd been the one to invite David and Lisa, or that she'd been the one to coordinate everyone's schedules to make sure they could all be together. Some things went unnoticed, she'd learned. The invisible work of keeping a family connected. Sarah appeared an hour later, hair perfectly styled despite it being Sunday, phone pressed to her ear as she gestured with her free hand. She was always on that phone, always managing some crisis at work or coordinating Emma's activities or dealing with one of Mark's job sites. She paused long enough to mouth "smells amazing" to Patricia before disappearing into her home office. Mark emerged from the garage around 2, oil-stained and satisfied from whatever project had occupied his morning. He was a good man, Patricia knew that. Hard-working, devoted to his family, never complained about having his mother-in-law living under his roof. But he had a way of moving through the house as if the clean laundry simply folded itself, as if meals appeared through some kind of domestic magic. "Hey, Mom," he said, using the title he'd adopted years ago. "Roast smells incredible. You're spoiling us, as usual." Patricia smiled and handed him a beer from the refrigerator. "It's no trouble. Why don't you go relax? Everything's under control here." By 4 o'clock, the table was set with Sarah's wedding china, crystal glasses catching the afternoon light streaming through the windows. Patricia had changed into her good blue dress, the one Sarah had bought her last Christmas. She'd even put on lipstick, something she rarely bothered with anymore. David and Lisa arrived right on time, bearing flowers and compliments about the heavenly smells drifting from the kitchen. Patricia's youngest son had always been the most thoughtful of her children, the one who still called every week just to check in. Lisa kissed Patricia's cheek and insisted on helping with the final preparations, though Patricia had everything well in hand. "You've outdone yourself again, Mom," David said, surveying the spread. "This looks like Thanksgiving." "Just wanted everyone together," Patricia said simply. "It's been too long since we've all sat down properly." The roast was resting on the counter, perfectly cooked and ready to carve. The vegetables were glazed and golden. The rolls were warm in their basket, butter melting into small pools of yellow silk. Everything was ready. Everything was perfect. That's when Sarah's phone rang. Patricia watched her daughter's face transform as she answered, watched the casual Sunday afternoon expression shift into something sharper, more focused. Sarah held up one finger to the room, a gesture that meant business was calling, even on family time. "Mark," Sarah said, covering the phone with her hand. "That's your boss. He wants to stop by and discuss the Morrison project." Mark straightened in his chair. "The The Morrison project was big, the kind of contract that could set them up for years. Patricia understood that. She'd been married to a working man long enough to know that opportunities didn't always come at convenient times. "How long will he be here?" Mark asked. Sarah covered the phone again. "Not sure. Maybe an hour? He's already on his way." Patricia felt something cold settle in her stomach, but she pushed it away. This was important for Mark's business. The dinner could wait. Family always adapted, always made room for what mattered. "That's fine," she said quickly. "We can push dinner back an hour. Everything will keep warm in the oven." But Sarah was shaking her head, still holding the phone. "Actually, Mom, I think it would be better if we had some space. You know how these business dinners can be. Very focused, lots of shop talk." The cold feeling in Patricia's stomach spread upward, reaching her chest. "Space? Just for tonight. Maybe you could eat a little later, after our meeting is done?" The words hung in the air like smoke from a kitchen fire. Patricia stared at her daughter. This woman she had raised, whom she had taught to tie her shoes and helped with homework and held through countless tears, and tried to process what she was hearing. "You want me to eat after everyone else?" Sarah's face flushed slightly, but her voice remained steady. "It's just business, Mom. You understand." Patricia looked around the dining room she had set so carefully, the good china gleaming under the chandelier, the flowers David and Lisa had brought, already arranged in her favorite vase, the roast cooling on the counter, surrounded by all the sides she'd spent the morning preparing. 45 years of cooking for her family, 5 years of rebuilding her life around their needs, their schedules, their priorities. And now she was being asked to step aside, to make herself invisible while her own meal grew cold. "I see," Patricia said quietly. She walked into the kitchen, her movements automatic, muscle memory taking over when her mind couldn't quite process the situation. Her hands moved without conscious thought, turning off the oven, transferring the roast to a carving board. The vegetables still glistened with their honey glaze, the rolls still steamed in their basket. "Mom?" Sarah's voice came from behind her, uncertain now. "You understand, right? It's just this once." Patricia didn't turn around. She was staring at the roast, at the perfect golden brown crust she'd achieved by getting up early to season it properly, by monitoring it carefully all afternoon. She was thinking about all the Sunday dinners that had come before this one, all the meals she'd planned and prepared and served, while standing on feet that ached more with each passing year. She was thinking about the kitchen in her old house, the one she'd given up to be here, the dining room where she and Robert had hosted Christmas mornings and birthday celebrations and quiet Tuesday night dinners for 40 years. The space that had been hers, where her presence was never questioned, never negotiable. "You'll eat after everyone else." The words echoed in her mind, and suddenly Patricia understood something she hadn't quite grasped before. She wasn't part of this family dinner. She was the help. She was the woman who cooked and cleaned and watched the children, who lived in their house and followed their rules and arranged her entire existence around their convenience. When had that happened? When had she stopped being Sarah's mother and become simply the person who made life easier for everyone else? The front doorbell rang and Sarah hurried to answer it. Patricia could hear voices in the living room, Mark's hearty greeting, the sound of chairs being moved around the dining room table. Her table, set with her careful attention to detail, where she was no longer welcome. She looked at the roast again, at the meal she'd spent all day preparing with love and anticipation. She thought about eating it alone in the kitchen while her family entertained their important guest in the next room. She thought about waiting, always waiting, for everyone else's needs to be met before her own mattered. And then, for the first time in 5 years, Patricia stopped thinking about what everyone else needed. She reached for the carving board and lifted the roast, still hot from the oven. She walked to the counter and began transferring the vegetables to storage containers, moving with quiet efficiency. The rolls went into a bag, the gravy into a jar. "Mom!" Sarah appeared in the kitchen doorway, her voice tight with confusion. "What are you doing?" Patricia didn't look up from her packing. "You said you needed space for your dinner. I'm giving you space." "I meant just for tonight, for the meeting." "I know what you meant." Patricia sealed the last container and reached for her purse, hanging on its usual hook by the back door. She'd been carrying the same black leather bag for 15 years, a Christmas gift from Robert that had aged into something comfortable and familiar. "Mom, you're being ridiculous. It's just one dinner." Patricia finally turned to face her daughter. Sarah looked younger suddenly, uncertain in a way that reminded Patricia of the little girl who used to climb into her parents' bed during thunderstorms. "You're right," Patricia said calmly. "It is just one dinner, and I'm going to enjoy it." She gathered the bags of food and walked toward the door. Behind her, she could hear Sarah calling her name, could hear the confusion and something that might have been panic creeping into her voice. But Patricia didn't stop. She'd waited long enough, 5 years of being grateful for a place at someone else's table, 5 years of believing that being needed was the same thing as being valued, 5 years of forgetting that she had once had her own dining room, her own space, her own voice in deciding when and where and with whom she would share her meals. As she reached her car, Patricia heard the front door open behind her. "Mom, where are you going? You can't just leave." Patricia loaded the bags into her back seat and turned to face her daughter one last time. Sarah stood on the front steps, still in her business clothes, looking smaller somehow without the authority of her own kitchen behind her. "You have a lovely dinner with your guest," Patricia said, her voice steady and calm. "Don't worry about me. I'll manage just fine." And for the first time in 5 years, Patricia knew that was absolutely true. The Hampton Inn on Route 9 wasn't exactly where Patricia had imagined spending her Sunday evening, but the front desk clerk had been kind, and the room was clean and quiet. She sat at the small table by the window, the containers of food spread before her like a modest feast. The roast was still warm, the vegetables still glistening with their honey glaze. For the first time in years, Patricia ate dinner in complete silence. Not the tense silence of an argument, not the distracted quiet of people scrolling their phones, but the deep, peaceful silence of solitude. She cut the roast slowly, savoring each bite. It was perfectly seasoned, tender and juicy from hours of careful preparation. She'd forgotten how good her own cooking could taste when she wasn't worried about everyone else's plates. Her phone had been buzzing constantly since she'd checked in. Sarah's name flashing across the screen again and again, followed by Mark's number, then David's. She'd turned the volume off after the first dozen calls. Whatever crisis was unfolding in her absence could wait until morning. As she ate, Patricia found herself really looking around the hotel room for the first time. It was generic, certainly. Beige walls, landscape prints that meant nothing, furniture designed to be inoffensive rather than beautiful. But it was quiet. It was hers. For the first time in 5 years, every decision about this space was entirely up to her. The temperature, the lighting, what time to eat, what to watch on television, when to go to sleep. The realization hit her gradually, like dawn breaking slowly across a winter sky. She wasn't just angry about dinner. She wasn't just hurt about being excluded from one meal. This was about 5 years of disappearing, bit by bit, into the background of someone else's life. When had she last made a decision that wasn't filtered through someone else's needs first? When Sarah wanted to redecorate the living room, Patricia had agreed it was a wonderful idea, even though she'd loved the old furniture. When Mark suggested they needed more garage space for his tools, Patricia had quietly moved her gardening supplies to make room. When Emma had wanted to use Patricia's bedroom for a sleepover, Patricia had spent the night on the couch without complaint. Small compromises, she'd told herself. That's what families did. That's what love looked like. Putting others first, making space, adapting to fit. But when did adapting become disappearing? When did making space mean giving up her own place entirely? Patricia pushed her plate away, surprised to find she'd eaten everything. She couldn't remember the last time she'd finished a meal without jumping up to refill someone's glass or check on something in the kitchen. She couldn't remember the last time she'd eaten without mentally planning the next meal, or cleaning up from the last one, or listening with half an ear for someone calling her name. Her phone lit up again. This time it was David. She hesitated, then answered. "Mom, where are you?" Sarah called. She's worried sick. "I'm safe, honey. I'm fine." "But where are you? Sarah said you just left with all the food. She said there was some kind of misunderstanding about dinner." Patricia almost laughed at that. A misunderstanding, as if she'd simply confused the time or forgotten about an appointment. "There wasn't a misunderstanding, David. Your sister made it very clear that I wasn't welcome at tonight's dinner. So I took my meal and left." "Mom, that's not—" She said Mark's boss was there. It was a business thing. "I know what it was." There was a long pause. Patricia could hear Lisa's voice in the background, asking questions David couldn't answer. "Look, I'm sure it was just... Sarah's been under a lot of pressure at work. Mark, too. You know how it is." "Do I?" Patricia asked quietly. "David, when was the last time you had dinner at your sister's house?" What do you mean?" "When was the last time you sat at that dining room table for Sunday dinner?" Another pause. "I don't know. A few months ago. We've been busy with the house renovations, and Lisa's been working weekends." "When was the last time before tonight that Sarah invited you over?" David was quiet for so long that Patricia wondered if the call had dropped. Finally, he spoke. "Mom, what are you getting at?" "I'm getting at the fact that tonight was the first time in 2 years that your sister invited you and Lisa for Sunday dinner. And it only happened because I made all the arrangements. I called you, I planned the menu, I did all the shopping and cooking. Sarah didn't even remember you were coming until she saw me setting extra places." The silence on David's end stretched longer this time. "But when Mark's boss needed to come over, suddenly there wasn't room for me at the table I'd been setting every week for 5 years. The table I set tonight. The meal I spent all day preparing." "Mom, I'm not angry, David. I'm just tired. I'm tired of being invisible until I'm inconvenient." After David hung up, promising to call again in the morning, Patricia ran a hot bath and soaked until her skin wrinkled. She thought about all the baths she hadn't taken in the last 5 years, because someone always needed something. Emma's homework help, Oliver's bedtime story, dishes that couldn't wait, laundry that had to be folded. When had she last spent an hour doing absolutely nothing except taking care of herself? She thought about Robert, about their quiet evenings together in their own house. He would have been furious about tonight, she realized. Robert, who had always insisted that Patricia deserved a seat at any table, who had never questioned her right to be included in her own family's life. "You're too good to them, Patty," he used to say when the kids were young and demanding. "They take you for granted because you let them." She'd brushed off his concerns then. The children were young, she'd said. They needed her. It was natural for mothers to sacrifice for their families. But Robert had worried even then that Patricia gave too much of herself away piece by piece until there might not be enough left. Had he been right? Had she spent so many years defining herself through other people's needs that she'd forgotten she had any of her own? Patricia woke the next morning feeling more rested than she had in months. The hotel bed was comfortable, but more than that, she'd slept through the night without listening for Oliver's crying or getting up to check that Emma had remembered to turn off her bedroom light. She'd slept the deep, uninterrupted sleep of someone with no one else to worry about. She ordered room service for breakfast, something she'd never done in her life. Coffee, eggs Benedict, fresh fruit. She ate slowly, reading the newspaper from cover to cover instead of scanning headlines between tasks. When the food was finished, she left the tray outside her door for someone else to collect and felt a guilty thrill at the luxury of it. Her phone showed 17 missed calls and 12 text messages. She scrolled through them while sipping her second cup of coffee. Sarah: "Mom, please call me. I don't understand what happened." Sarah: "Mark's boss left. We saved you a plate." Sarah: "This is ridiculous. Just come home." Mark: "Patricia, Sarah's really upset. Can we talk about this?" Emma: "Grandma, where are you? Mom is crying." That last message made Patricia's chest tighten. She didn't want Emma to see her mother upset, didn't want to be the cause of family drama. But she also couldn't pretend that nothing had happened. She couldn't just go back and slip into her old role as if Sunday night had been a simple misunderstanding. She called Sarah. "Mom! Oh, thank God! Where are you?" "I'm safe. I'm fine." "But where? I can come pick you up." "I don't need to be picked up, Sarah. I have my own car." "Mom, I'm so sorry about last night. It was just... Mark's boss is really important for his business, and I thought it would be better to keep it professional. I didn't mean for you to feel excluded." Patricia sat quietly for a moment, watching traffic through her hotel room window. Normal people going about their normal Monday morning routines. People who had their own homes, their own lives, their own choices about how to spend their days. "Sarah, do you remember 5 years ago when you asked me to move in with you?" "Of course. We wanted you close by, especially after Dad died. And you've been such a help with everything. What did you say I would be? Do you remember the exact words?" Sarah was quiet for a moment. I said we could help each other. You wouldn't have to rattle around in that big house alone, and I could use help with the kids and things." "Help," Patricia repeated. "That's right. You needed help. Not a grandmother for your children, not a mother to include in your family. Help." "Mom, that's not fair. You know we love having you here." "Do you? When was the last time you asked my opinion about anything important? When was the last time we had a conversation about anything other than what Emma needs for school, or what to make for dinner, or whether Oliver's fever was high enough to call the doctor?" We talk all the time. We discuss logistics, Sarah. We coordinate schedules. When was the last time you asked me how I was feeling, or what I wanted to do with my day, or whether I was happy?" The silence stretched between them. Patricia could hear Oliver babbling in the background, Emma asking about breakfast. "I need you to come home, Mom. I don't know how to do all this without you." And there it was, the truth that had been hiding under 5 years of being needed, being helpful, being indispensable. Sarah didn't miss her mother. She missed her unpaid childcare provider. She missed her cook and housekeeper and constant safety net. "You managed before I moved in," Patricia said gently. "You'll manage now." "What does that mean?" "It means I'm going to find my own place to live. It means you're going to have to figure out your own childcare and meal planning and household management. It means I'm going to stop being your help and start being your mother again. You can't be serious." "I've never been more serious about anything in my life." Patricia ended the call before Sarah could respond. She sat in the quiet hotel room, surrounded by the detritus of her temporary life. The takeout containers from last night, her overnight bag packed with the few personal items she'd thought to grab, her purse containing credit cards she hadn't used in years, and the checkbook for an account that had been growing steadily because she never spent money on herself anymore. She had enough saved to rent a small apartment. She had her Social Security, a small pension from her teaching years. She had skills. She could cook. She could clean. She could manage a household. Other people paid good money for those skills. For the first time in 5 years, Patricia started making plans that were entirely her own. The apartment she found was small but bright, a 1-bedroom unit in a complex designed for seniors. It had a galley kitchen that reminded her of her first apartment as a young teacher, before she'd married Robert and inherited his mother's massive dining room set. There was a small balcony overlooking a courtyard with flower beds and benches where residents could sit and read. The rent was reasonable, well within her budget. The community center offered classes, watercolor painting, book clubs, gentle yoga. There was a shuttle service to the grocery store and shopping center. She could live here independently, on her own terms. "When would you like to move in?" the leasing agent asked. Patricia thought about Sarah's house, about the bedroom that had never quite felt like hers, the kitchen where she cooked meals for people who barely looked up from their phones to acknowledge the effort. She thought about the dining room table where, last night, she hadn't been welcome. How about today? The next few days passed in a blur of activity that Patricia found surprisingly energizing. She bought furniture, not much, just the basics, but each piece was something she had chosen herself. A small dining table with 2 chairs, a comfortable reading chair in her favorite shade of blue, dishes for one, simple white ceramic that pleased her eye. Sarah called multiple times each day, her voice growing more frantic with each conversation. The childcare arrangements were falling through. Emma was acting out at school. Mark was working late because he had to stop home during the day to check on things. The house was a disaster. "Just come back for a few weeks," Sarah pleaded, "until I can get organized, until I can find someone to help." "You can find someone," Patricia agreed. "There are wonderful babysitters, housekeeping services, meal delivery companies. You have options. But it's so expensive." "Yes," Patricia said. "Good help usually is." David visited her on Thursday, bringing flowers and a worried expression. He walked through her little apartment, taking in the carefully arranged furniture, the books she'd unpacked first and placed prominently on the small bookshelf, the photographs of her grandchildren on the side table. "It's nice, Mom," he said finally. "Small, but nice." "It's mine," Patricia said simply. They had coffee together on her tiny balcony, watching other residents tend the communal garden below. David was quiet for a long time, and Patricia could see him struggling with something. "I called Sarah," he said finally. She's having a hard time." "I imagine she is." "Emma's been asking for you. She doesn't understand why you moved out." Patricia felt the familiar tug of guilt, the ingrained response to put everyone else's comfort before her own, but she also felt something newer, stronger. The quiet satisfaction of waking up in her own space, of making her own coffee, of deciding for herself when to eat and what to watch on television. "Emma can visit me anytime," Patricia said. "In fact, I'd love that. We could go to the movies or the zoo or just stay here and bake cookies. Just the 2 of us." "And Oliver?" "Sarah can bring Oliver too, when she's ready to have a conversation about what kind of relationship we're going to have going forward." David leaned back in his chair, studying his mother's face. "You look different, Mom." "Different how?" "I don't know. Rested, maybe. Like you're not worried about 20 things at once." Patricia smiled. "I'm not. For the first time in 5 years, the only person I have to worry about is me. It's remarkably liberating." "But don't you miss them? Don't you miss being part of their daily life?" Patricia considered the question seriously. She did miss Emma's chatter about school, missed Oliver's giggling attempts at words. She missed the satisfaction of a well-cooked meal shared with people she loved. But she didn't miss the constant vigilance, the endless list of tasks that were somehow always her responsibility. She didn't miss feeling invisible until she was inconvenient. She didn't miss the gradual erosion of her own identity until she became simply an extension of everyone else's needs. "I miss the good parts," she said finally, "but I don't miss feeling like a stranger in my own life." On Saturday, exactly 1 week after the Sunday dinner that had changed everything, Patricia sat in her new reading chair with a cup of tea and the novel she'd been trying to finish for 6 months. No one needed lunch prepared. No one required help with homework. No one was asking her to referee sibling arguments or schedule doctor's appointments or remember which day was picture day at school. The silence in her apartment was profound and peaceful. Through her balcony doors, she could hear the sounds of the world continuing without her constant participation. Children playing in the courtyard, neighbors chatting, the distant hum of traffic. Life going on, but at a pace she could observe rather than frantically trying to manage. Her phone rang. Sarah's number appeared on the screen, but Patricia let it go to voicemail. She was learning the revolutionary concept of answering her phone when she wanted to, not because it demanded her immediate attention. When she finally listened to the message an hour later, Sarah's voice was different, calmer, but also more serious. "Mom, I need to talk to you. Not about coming back, just to talk. I've been thinking about what you said, about the last 5 years. Could I come over? Just me, not the kids. I want to understand what happened." Patricia called her back. "You can come over Sunday afternoon, but Sarah, I want you to understand something. I'm not coming back to live with you. This conversation isn't about convincing me to change my mind. It's about figuring out how we move forward from here." "I know," Sarah said quietly. "I know that now." Sunday afternoon arrived gray and cool, with the promise of spring rain in the air. Patricia had spent the morning at the community center, taking her first watercolor class in 40 years. Her painting was amateur at best, a simple landscape that looked more like a child's art project than anything worthy of display. But she'd enjoyed the process, the meditative focus of brush on paper, the gentle encouragement of the instructor and other students. She'd signed up for the book club that met Tuesday evenings and the gentle yoga class on Thursday mornings, small commitments, manageable obligations that were entirely her choice. Sarah arrived at exactly 2 o'clock, carrying a small bakery box and looking uncertain in a way that reminded Patricia of the nervous teenager who'd once asked permission to go to her first school dance. "I brought those petit fours you like," Sarah said, offering the box like a peace offering. They sat at Patricia's small dining table, the first meal Sarah had ever shared in a space that belonged entirely to her mother. Patricia made tea in her own teapot, using the good cups she'd bought herself, arranging the petit fours on a plate she'd chosen because it made her smile. "The apartment is lovely, Mom," Sarah said, looking around. "It suits you." "Thank you." They ate in silence for a few minutes, the weight of the past week settling between them. Finally, Sarah spoke. "I hired a babysitter," she said, "for after school and summers, and a housekeeper who comes twice a week, and we're getting meal kits delivered 3 times a week." Patricia nodded. "That sounds like a good plan." "It's expensive," Sarah continued. "I had no idea how expensive. I mean, I knew childcare was costly, but I'd never really calculated what all the things you did were worth." "They're worth quite a lot," Patricia agreed. Sarah looked down at her hands, wrapped around her teacup. "I took you for granted." "Yes, you did. I don't know when it happened, when you stopped being my mom and became my employee. But that's what it felt like, wasn't it? Like you worked for us." Patricia felt something tight in her chest begin to loosen. "Yes, that's exactly what it felt like. I'm sorry." Sarah's voice was thick with tears. "I'm so sorry, Mom. I never meant for that to happen." "I know you didn't. But it did happen, and we can't pretend it didn't." They sat quietly again, listening to the rain that had finally begun to fall against the windows. Patricia watched her daughter, really looked at her for the first time in years. Sarah was 38 now, a successful professional, a mother herself. When had Patricia stopped seeing her as a capable adult and started treating her like a child who needed constant rescuing? "I want to fix this," Sarah said finally. "I want to figure out how to have a real relationship with you again, not as your employer, but as your daughter." "I want that too," Patricia said, "but it's going to have to be different than before. I'm not going back to being your backup plan for everything. I'm not going back to having my life revolve entirely around your family's needs." "I understand. Do you? Because it means you can't call me every time Emma forgets her homework and expect me to drop everything to bring it to school. It means I won't be available for last-minute babysitting just because it's convenient for you. It means I might say no sometimes, and you'll have to respect that." Sarah nodded slowly. "What does it mean for the kids? For Emma and Oliver?" Patricia smiled, the first genuine smile she'd shared with her daughter in longer than she could remember. It means they get to have a grandmother instead of a live-in nanny. It means when I spend time with them, it's because I want to, not because I have to. It means they get to visit me in my own space, where I can spoil them and then send them home to you. They'd like that. So would I. As Sarah prepared to leave, she paused at the door. "Mom, that Sunday dinner, when I asked you to eat separately, I knew it was wrong the moment I said it. I knew it, but I was so focused on impressing Mark's boss that I didn't think. You thought I would always be there no matter how you treated me," Patricia said. "And for a long time, that was true. But not anymore." Patricia shook her head. "Not anymore. I love you, Sarah. I love Emma and Oliver and Mark. But I love myself, too. And I'd forgotten that for a while. I won't forget again." After Sarah left, Patricia stood on her small balcony watching the rain fall on the courtyard garden below. Tomorrow, she would call the community college about auditing an art history class she'd seen advertised. She would grocery shop for one person, cook meals she wanted to eat, read books that interested her rather than children's stories for the 100th time. She would visit her grandchildren when it suited her schedule, not theirs. She would build relationships with her family based on mutual respect rather than necessity. She would live her own life, make her own choices, fill her days with activities that brought her joy rather than just fulfilling everyone else's needs. For the first time in 5 years, Patricia looked forward to tomorrow, and the day after that, and all the days stretching ahead of her. Days that belonged entirely to her, to fill as she chose. The roast had been perfectly seasoned, she remembered. It had been delicious, eaten in the quiet solitude of that hotel room. But more than that, it had been hers. Every bite had been a choice she'd made for herself, a small act of reclaiming the life she'd almost forgotten she deserved to live.